Hello, and welcome to Based on Facts, where fiction and superstition meet logic and scientific facts on WELT 95.7 FM, broadcasting from the Allen County Public Library. My name is Chris Rex actually, and I'm going to be talking about the conference I just got back from a couple days ago here. The American Humanist Association is basically an association of humanists in America. It's really not difficult to understand that. But what we did was we basically went to this conference, we meaning me and a few other people, because of the fact that we were all part of this organization here in Fort Wayne that's a local chapter of the AHA. Now, this conference technically basically took place from June 8th through the 11th. So me and my friends were out of town for the past few days in order to attend this conference. Now, when I say that I went with a few friends, I don't mean that I met up with them there, even though that was the case for two of them. The other four, including myself, ended up carpooling down, basically driving from here to the conference location. Now, the conference itself took place in Charleston, South Carolina. For those of you who don't know, carpooling with 4 people traveling that far, that's basically like a 14-hour drive. It's quite a trek, quite an adventure. So that was interesting and just kind of reminded me of how much I hate driving and riding in the car for long distances. Now, fortunately, I did not have to drive. 2 of the other members were kind enough to drive, but it still was really hard on me, not only just in general, but also because of the fact that I was trying to get over my sickness that I've been infected with for 2 weeks now. So I just so happened to get sick right before leaving the conference, and am just now starting to get over it once I get back from the conference. So that's convenient. But anyway, point is that we decided to go to this conference, me and my 5 friends. We decided to go to this conference because most of us are members, in fact all of us are members, of an organization here in Fort Wayne called Free Thought Fort Wayne. Now, Free Thought Fort Wayne is basically a nice little club of sorts where people who are agnostic or atheist or humanist can come together and exchange thoughts and ideas. Now, obviously, we don't discriminate per se. We do accept anyone into our organization. It's just that our organization is really meant for those that are non-theistic, which is to say, people who don't believe in a God, or people who at least doubt the existence of a God. Now, so far as why we went to this conference, as I mentioned before, we are a chapter of the AHA. In fact, when we did this, when we first became a chapter of the AHA, 2 years back I believe, we were the first chapter of the AHA in Indiana. Just pretty cool, pretty remarkable. There is now a second chapter located out of South Bend. Anyway, getting back to the conference, I was coerced to go to this conference. Okay, I was thinking about going, and you know, I sat there and I weighed the costs and the benefits, and I'm like, well, I don't know, I do have a lot of stuff that I should be doing, that I should be getting caught up on and so forth. I should probably just stay home, work on my projects, get some things accomplished, take advantage of my summer break and relax and get some rest to get over my sickness. Well, my wife was kind enough to sign me up for this conference and pay the registration fee and buy my ticket, basically. So she kind of sat down and said, "You're going, because you need to go." I'm like, "Okay, you're right. I should go." So I end up going to the conference. Hence I go on this grand road trip adventure, seeing some beautiful lands, some remarkable remarkable trees, hills, and forests, all sorts of rocky habitat, and just watching the dirt change color is always remarkable. But it's actually kind of sad at the same time. Even though at first glance when you look over the landscape as you're going south and east, it's always really sad to me because the further south you go, the more you realize the green that you're seeing is almost a monoculture. Which is to say, a lot of what you're seeing is one type of plant. And this is a plant that strangles other plants, most notably trees and shrubs. But this plant is called Japanese kudzu. And it's kind of a vine that essentially climbs up trees, wraps around them, shoots out a ton of leaves. Okay, so it makes the scenery a lot greener. That's true, because you don't see the brown of the trunk of the trees. But it also kind of robs nutrients from the trees, robs sunlight from the tree's own leaves. And so eventually, this kudzu just ends up stealing all of the nutrients from the tree, and the tree ends up dying. Which is very, very unfortunate. So this Japanese kudzu, given its name, you can kind of tell that it might not necessarily be from America. And that's because, yes, it's an invasive species. Invasive species of vine that was introduced from Japan. Unfortunately, it is very hardy, very difficult to get rid of. Hence why it basically has taken over most tree sites from, like Kentucky down south, and south from there. So it's really unfortunate to see that. Even though at first glance the scenery looks way more green than you would ever see it, it's very artificial and is not a good sign at all. Not many people realize that. Anyway, getting back to the trip. Not a whole lot of excitement on the trip itself, so that was good. Once we get to the conference, then we basically ended up having a little bit of free time before the first talk, and so I requested to be dropped off into the national forest that was near the conference location. Now the conference itself took place at the Embassy Suites by Hilton. This was at the Charleston Airport Hotel and Convention Center there in Charleston. Beautiful place. Huge place. It's basically just one big structure. It's a series of structures, but they're all connected by skywalks and hallways and stuff. So it's really quite a complex. Very impressive, actually. Anyway, before we get to go to any of the talks, I managed to convince the driver to drop me off at the nearby forest. This was the Francis Marion National Forest, and I was able to walk around and get at least some sort of feeling for some of the natural types of plants and organisms and animal life that are native to South Carolina, because I had never been to South Carolina before. I'd been to Florida, but never South Carolina. As such, it was quite an adventure, and it was quite a fun little hike, just being able to see some of the different types of creatures that I wouldn't necessarily be able to see up here. Now, unfortunately, the creatures that I'm talking about aren't really animal life. Really didn't get to see any birds. I didn't necessarily get to see any herps, unfortunately. Which is to say, I didn't get to see any reptiles or amphibians. But what I did get to see was a crayfish that was out of water, which is an unusual sight. But once again, not anything terribly remarkable because we have crayfish up here. But it was just funny to come across them up on the shoreline, then scare them back down into the water. the other thing that I did get to see that was kind of interesting to look at was a number of different species of mushrooms. Now, I'm not good with mushroom identification at all, but I do know what I have seen and what I have not seen. And I definitely saw some species of mushrooms that I had not seen before. Same thing with plants. I mean, I saw these weird, slender, grassy looking plants that grew to be 9 feet tall, which was really impressive. But aside from that, I had to be mindful during this hike that down in South Carolina, there are a lot of dangerous things right there. Okay, they legitimately have cottonmouths. Okay, Indiana really doesn't have them. They have eastern diamondback rattlesnakes. They have coral snakes. Aside from snakes, they do have alligators in some places as well. I mean, they've got some legitimate dangers as far as herps are concerned. And so I was definitely cautious in my hiking, especially when I came across a large pond, so to speak, in this national forest. Just making sure to keep an eye out for any potential alligators in the water or on shore, or look for evidence of an alligator slide, so to speak, which is an indentation on the shoreline indicating a usual spot for an alligator to enter or exit the water. I didn't see anything like that. Now, I did see one hill or mound, so to speak, that felt to me like it was an alligator nest, but once again, I didn't see any active slides around there, so I really didn't, so I kind of dismissed that notion. So I honestly don't think I saw anything related to herps at all on that trip. But I did get to see some fish, did get to see the crayfish, got to see a couple frogs, and got to see a random camp, human encampment, that had like a charcoal grill and some camping chairs and other various camping supplies, and some cut up logs. So it found like a little campsite, but really didn't find much else. So we needed to get back to the conference to kind of move into our room, check into our room, and start going to the talks and things, get registered and sign up. So we went ahead and went back to the hotel, caught an Uber on the way back. That was my first time using Uber. I'd never used it before. And of course, my first time using Uber, I ended up putting in the wrong address. So leave it to me to screw up getting back to the hotel. Because apparently there are 2 Embassy Suites by Hilton in Charleston. And they're about 15 minutes from each other. So yeah, I went to the one that was like 15 minutes farther away. So that was great, paying for more money than what I should have, out of my own stupidity. But alas, whatever. Finally ended up back at the hotel. There was only one talk that first day, and so I got to catch the tail end of that talk. And it was basically about trying to think of some ways to increase membership in some of these organizations that are chapters of the AHA, or that have members that are members of the AHA as well, or just people who are kind of enthusiastic about the American Humanist Association and its mission. Basically, what really is fundamental about the AHA's mission is, just their commitment to try to provide all these different services without necessarily invoking God, and focusing more on the people and less on magical, supernatural types of entities. Anyway, so that first talk really was for foundational, organizational kinds of things, just to help other organizations out. After that, we were able to go ahead and get our register stuff, get our fun little goodies for registering, make sure we had all the tickets that we needed, and we were able to go on our way. we did manage to mingle a little bit that day, talking to some people that we've been kind of wanting to talk to. People within the AHA and some of the vendors that had set up outside of the conference area. So it was really a very nice area to have a conference. I was impressed. It's very cool. But really, that was about it for the first day. People were just kind of slowly pouring in and getting registered and getting settled into their hotel rooms and stuff. They're probably jet lagged or lagged from being in the car for umpteen hours. So it was kind of fun. Kind of fun just trying to relax for once. But alas, we had previously decided, we 6 people from Freethought, had previously decided that it would be a great idea to utilize this first night, since there was only one talk, and since most of the time was to be spent kind of mingling around and exploring and whatnot, we decided it'd be a good idea to go out to a restaurant and go out to eat together, because that's kind of fun. So we chose this place called Butter Tapas. I have no clue what a tapa is, but I know what butter is, and butter sounds good, so figured it'd be alright for me and I could probably find something interesting. But this place was very different. Very different. Had very unique cuisine that I'd never seen or heard of before in my life. If I had the menu in front of me, I could list off some of the things, but I just know that what I got was what was called a lobster corn dog. Really bizarre. But essentially what it was a lobster tail that was shoved onto a stick and battered up and fried. Hence why they called it a lobster corn dog, because it's basically a corn dog, only instead of having a hot dog in the middle, it had a lobster in the middle. And I was suspicious at first. Really wasn't sure if I should gamble on getting this particular food item, but you know what? It was really good. Really good. I was very impressed. And apparently it had this sauce on the side that I just absolutely loved with the lobster corn dog. It went perfectly together. But all this stuff, like half the stuff on their menu, was part of what they call low country. Okay. Low country was a term that I was not familiar with before going to this conference. I had no idea what that meant. Apparently that's a southern thing, so to speak. Or a southeastern thing. I don't even know. I still don't really know what that entirely means. But needless to say, that was part of low country cooking, and I really liked it. So I was impressed. I was impressed. But anyway, apparently this place was known for making cupcakes for breakfast, and they had gained such a notoriety just for their cupcakes that when they make 200 cupcakes doesn't last past like 7:30 or something. Like, it is ridiculous. 200 cupcakes are all gone by like 7:30. That's crazy to think about. Absolutely crazy. So yeah, they at least have a fond reputation in the community for providing tasty and unique cupcakes for breakfast. Me, I need some meat. I really do. Gosh, I can't live, going to work and whatnot on a stomach of cupcake, or it's really hard for me to do it on bagels even. Bagels and butter and jelly. Gosh, I need some meat. Absolutely need some meat, and I really want some egg too with that meat. So that's why I do these Jimmy Dean breakfast sandwiches. They're frozen little dinners. They cost like $1 a piece, and you can get them from the frozen food section at Walmart. That's what sustains me every morning. But anyway, So we were there, we ate out, that was a lot of fun. Then we could finally start talking about the conference the next day. Alright, this is Friday, June 9th. And I'm just going to kind of lead you through some of these talks here that I found to be very, very interesting. Now, the theme of this conference, aside from the odd talk, which wasn't necessarily along this theme, the themes seemed to be related to the gay rights movement and recognizing the differences between sex and gender. Sex meaning male, female, and gender meaning more of a sex meaning more of a physical representation of male, female, and gender meaning more of a mental representation of male, female. That's kind of what I gathered from it anyway. Not to say that I'm an expert by any means, but that's what I kind of figured out. So that's the overarching theme of this conference. And so if I just kind of look through here, I'm looking through the session description, so to speak, and there's a number of places where these speakers were really talking about humanism from the standpoint that we want to be as inclusive as possible and minimize the discrimination. Which is to say, we want to improve communication between peoples in a way that is irrespective of their race, their religion, their sex, their gender, basically anything like that. We really want to kind of get rid of all those types of things that are so often used to discriminate and to divide people, and instead bring people together under one umbrella and be able to get along for once. That might be a positive thing. But anyway, excuse me. So basically these talks were all centered around this, and so just to read you some of the titles here. The first talk on Friday was called "What Do You People Want? A Positive Vision of Secularism." Okay, so it's essentially trying to get at what people expect from secular views and what we should try to project with our secular views. Because so often people see secular people, those who are non-theist, so often we are perceived as being devil worshipping or God hating or people hating or baby eating. I don't know, a bunch of horrible nasty things. That we have no morals, no sense of right and wrong, no ethics. All these different things, and a lot of people really subscribe to those views. And that's part of why atheists and their ilk are among the most hated groups of people here in America. And it's really quite phenomenal to hear that we are the hateful ones from those who are being hateful. It's just so frustrating to hear that. But so that's one of the types of things that we kind of talked about in this conference. Another session title here was, "What does a more inclusive humanism look like?" And so here they were trying to explore, this was actually a discussion panel. They had a number of very interesting speakers on this panel. And what was really cool was that they were trying to explore some of the ways that people are being treated with inequity in modern day. And it came right back to the same issues I kind of already mentioned. People fixating so much on sex and gender and all these other things that they're losing sight of the human component. And so that was really kind of what they were trying to emphasize in those sorts of talks there. 5 Easy Steps to Peace. That was another one. This particular individual, if I remember correctly, he actually broke out into song and started a little live music right there on the stage, which was unexpected and was definitely a way to try to bring peace to the world, a very old school way to bring peace, thinking back to some of the hippie methods in the 70s and such, as far as gathering around and listening to some live music and being all about kumbaya and this, that, and the other. Peace and love, man. And that's really what this guy was kind of going for as a feeling for his talk. And I thought he did well. It's just the live music caught some people off guard. Because they're all of a sudden like, whoa. All of a sudden we have a live performance. So that was kind of cool. But he really did talk about a couple different things that we need to address, so far as addressing the fear. Because really, before we can reach peace, we have to address the fear. And there's so much fear in the world. And one of the things about his talk, however, was the fact that he brought up love. And then he brought up fear. And I really don't subscribe to the notion that every human emotion, all infinitesimal amount of them, that they can all be described by fear and love. That is complete nonsense. Complete nonsense. You can't break down every single thing that you're feeling every single day into two categories, fear and love. That doesn't work. If I feel like throwing a rock on the ground just because it's sitting right next to me and I'm just kind of fidgeting around with my hands, that doesn't necessarily have to be an action that's respective of anything. All these fidget spinners and fidget cubes, if people are fidgeting, what's that supposed to be indicative of? Fear or love? That's a nonsensical question. It doesn't matter. If you're fidgeting, you're fidgeting. Having one of those spinners does not make you a fearful person. And having a fidget cube does not make you a loving person. It doesn't matter. That has nothing to do with anything. It just kills me when some people try to break down everything. One of the best movies I love that illustrates this topic in a way that I would approach it, or would have approached it in high school, is Donnie Darko. Alright, there's an excellent scene in that movie where the main character, Donnie, just stands up and calls out the teacher on how it's complete crap. This whole love and fear thing, this whole love and fear scale is complete crap. Because of the fact that you can't define everything of the human experience into those two categories. There's so many other emotions and other feelings and other driving factors that influence the equation. You can't possibly take everything and lump them into those two categories. It is physically impossible. So, admittedly, that was the first talk that I was really frustrated with. Just because this particular speaker really did try to do that. Gay, Black, and Atheist, Surviving Trump and Progressive Panic. Needless to say, this particular individual was gay, black, and atheist, which made him definitely among a minority. Just because even if you are black and homosexual, you are in a far worse position by being atheist. Now granted, many people who are black and homosexual end up becoming atheists because of the fact that it starts illuminating them to the reality of religion, which is to say that religion ends up poisoning a lot of people and turning them against homosexuals. And that can be a great turnoff for homosexuals. So actually, it's kind of a good thing that so many religious right-winged people who are staunch conservative Republicans and have strong faith views, most notably of the Christian variety. It's great that they are hating on the homosexual people so much, because it's actually feeding our numbers. It is driving away the homosexual parties to the side of atheists and agnostics and humanists. I don't mind that. But this particular individual, he was definitely kind of talking about how it is kind of rough being all of those things simultaneously, basically being able to take flack in a lot of different situations and being subjected to discrimination on so many different levels. And that's really unfortunate that things like that still happen, but they do. And I try to think and analyze my behavior, because I was grown up in a very, very white type of neighborhood, so to speak, in town, in school, such that I really didn't have much exposure to black people or to homosexual people. So finding out that there are people like this that fit those two bills and are atheist is just wow. Like, all three of those words, gay, atheist, and black, all three of those words really didn't exist in my town. And I'm I like to consider myself to be an LGBT ally of sorts, and because I definitely sympathize with their views, but I also recognize that there's some things that I myself can do better and try to help with. But anyway, more about that later. Oh yeah, right now, in fact. Panel discussion. Humanists can also have a savior complex. How to avoid activist pitfalls. So that's actually kind of what I was hinting at just now, was the fact that we have to be careful if we are in a position where we support another group, especially a group that is frequently undermined or discriminated upon or underprivileged or whatever. We have to keep in mind that it's our duty as friends and allies to make sure that what we're doing when we help these people is to bring them up to our own level, which is to say, give them an equal seat at the round table. Okay? Now, the problem in this particular talk was that they seem to think that in some cases, in a lot of cases, people end up going out and trying to help other people because they have a savior complex and they want to be a savior. But they call it a savior complex when the person doing the helping doesn't help the other person to the same level that they are. Which is to say, if you were helping somebody up the steps, up some steps to get into a place, you would help them to one step below you in order to maintain your superiority over them. I don't agree with that at all. I think that's a very, very dark way to put it. Because so often when I see people helping others, I don't see them helping them to a certain extent and stopping at that extent in order to keep that other person below them. I don't really see that. And it's very aggravating that was brought up a number of times during that particular panel discussion. So what I normally see is people bringing other people up to the same level that they are. Because that's what true equality is. But a number of times during this conference, and even during this one discussion, there were people that went up to the microphone to ask questions or give comments after the talk. A number of people went up to the microphone basically going off of this notion that most people when they're doing this savior complex thing, most people just need to check themselves and make sure that they're not, make sure that they're doing it for the right reasons and not just doing it purely for their own self-gratification. And it's like, well, okay, if you don't want to do something and you don't want to get something out of it, okay, then what are you doing? Like, people are supposed to get something out of everything that they do, That's kind of the point of living and being free, is to do something so long as it helps you and others. It's kind of the point. But a number of people seem to be going off on this tangent that, the only way that you can possibly help those who are underprivileged or discriminated against is to be 100% selfless. And it's like, well, I don't think that's possible or even necessary. Like, what do you want? What do you do that's 100% selfless? Not many people engage in anything that's 100% selfless. We tend to get something out of it sooner or later, whether it's connections, whether it's resume filler, volunteer hours, community hours, life experience. We always get something out of it. So I don't know what you're talking about when you say to be selfless. I also got frustrated at this notion that more often than not, when people were going in and trying to help others, they were calling it a savior complex. I don't know, that just really bothered me. Really bothered me. And when they started talking, it actually seemed like they weren't wanting an equal seat at the table. Like they were wanting to be the head of the table. Like they were wanting the opposite of the scenario they were just describing. Instead of me bringing you up to my level, you want me to bring you up to a level above my level. Or to the step above my step. Like, I don't think that's what equality means. Equality means the same level. It doesn't mean bring you up to a level that's above mine. That's ridiculous. That's reverse discrimination, is what that is. And I just got frustrated because the more that some of the people on some of these panels talked, and the more that certain audience members went up to the microphone and talked, it became apparent that a number of people had very strong feelings about encouraging this reverse discrimination. And that really rubbed me the wrong way. Even on the first day of talks, I started questioning whether I'd made a good decision in coming to this conference. Okay. And that was very unfortunate. I didn't want to regret coming to this conference. I wanted to actually learn something. And on this first day, the only thing that I'd really learned was that some people here are trying to reverse discriminate. Which is to say, they're trying to discriminate against white people and put them down in order to bring themselves up. And I didn't approve of that. In fact, at one point during the conference, people physically told the white people in line for comments and questions to go sit down while we hear from all the minority people. And I'm sorry, that really rubbed me the wrong way. I figure if there is a line and you get into the line, you are assured your place in the line. But no, all of the white people were kicked out of the line and all of the minorities were allowed to proceed and ask their questions and state their comments. I don't know how that's okay. I don't find it to be okay. I kind of thought that we were trying to encourage that all people's voices were equal. But during that conference, I got this real strong notion that my voice meant nothing. Less than nothing. My voice was insulting. And that really rubbed me the wrong way. Because nothing that I said or did was discriminatory or demeaning in any way that indicated prejudice. And yet I was treated like crap to some degree. And it was funny because even during one of the panels at one point, they specifically talked to white people, and they're like, you know what, if you're a white male, you just need to suck it up and listen and sit there and listen and accept everything that we are saying about you because you are racist. It's like, wow, that's really cool. I love having people just tell me to sit down and take it. And so, you know what? One of the leaders of this movement, to have white people just sit down and take it and accept the facts, I got to sit down with her at one point during the conference. On the last day of the conference, got to sit and have a chat with this particular individual. And she was basically one of the people that were really gunning for Native American rights and trying to defend Native Americans, in particular during the DAPL protests, the oil pipeline in South Dakota, North Dakota, something like that. Yeah. She was a part of that. She was a journalist who had gone there and stayed for a while and reported on some of the goings on there. So that was really her big thing, and she was on one of the panels discussing as well. But I got to sit down with her and talk to her because she had said some things that weren't necessarily accurate during some of her other comments and musings. And like I said, the way that she was treating white people was incredibly insulting and discriminatory. I didn't exactly take kindly to that. So I decided to sit down with her and have a little discussion. And it turns out she doesn't like her her proposed approach for white people. She doesn't like just being told the facts and being told to accept it, even though she was telling white people to do that. She didn't like it being turned, she didn't like her strategy being turned on her at all. In fact, she got up from the table where we were sitting together. She just got up and stormed off and gave me the middle finger and told me to go F myself. So that was a lot of fun. Always a lot of fun when you run into people who are hypocritical. And although they come off as if they encourage one type of behavior, when said behavior is used against them, they all of a sudden don't like it. I'm sorry. She got a taste of her own medicine, and she couldn't take the heat. I feel like I accomplished something. Because I cannot stand hypocrites. Cannot stand hypocrites. It's like talking to a gay person that hates black people. It's like, that's hypocritical. You realize that, right? Like, you're okay with being gay, but you're all of a sudden not okay with being, non-discriminatory towards race? Like, you kind of have to be non-discriminatory in both, actually. Otherwise, what are you doing? Doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, then we got to some fun talks. Just here on the first day of Real Talks. Navigating humanist sexuality. Okay, so we had to talk about some of that stuff just because of how much sexual ethics really plays a role in being humanist, And when you go to ask somebody what their feelings are about homosexuals, and you try to preface with, don't mention religion. Without mentioning religion, tell me why you think homosexuality is bad. And you know what? More often than not, they will not be able to produce a logical answer that makes any deal of sense. if they do produce an answer that makes some sense, it's because it's often in a way that is devoid of actual scientific knowledge. Okay, which is to say, they normally spout something about, oh yeah, homosexuality isn't natural, doesn't occur anywhere else in the animal kingdom, it's strictly a human-based thing, and yeah, none of that is true. It really isn't. And it's very, very aggravating when people act like they actually know something about biology and they try to start spouting things off. Yeah, that was one of my problems with the Native American lady that I was just talking about. She tried to start talking about RNA. And I just flat out asked her, so what about RNA? Tell me about it. Explain it to me. Because, you know, I'm a biologist, so I completely understand RNA. And she was trying to assert that RNA was heritable. And that it was through heritable RNA that trauma is passed down through generations. Because her and certain other sympathizers of hers were sitting around a table and discussing, you know, how nice it is to have this past history of abuse and torture in your race or population or whatever, and how you are so traumatized, you know, genetically because of RNA being passed down through generations. Needless to say, she did not understand what she was talking about. Okay, and that's why I was probing her. Because the reality of it is, well, okay, epigenetic changes can occur from one generation to the next as a result of trauma as an adult. What that means is that there are certain changes made to the gametes, most notably the egg and sperm of humans, that allows them to pass on certain information from mother to child, or from father to child, in order to accommodate certain life experiences. So if you are traumatized as a child, there may be certain bits of information that are transferred through your gametes to the next generation. This is the excuse that a number of people were using in order to try to justify their behavior modern day. Their behavior, their mentality, whatever. You know, that they are genetically scarred, so to speak. And although there's some truth to that, the fact of the matter is that these mechanisms can happen a couple different ways. One is that you can directly change the DNA through histone modifications, which basically govern gene regulation. Or you can exert your power through RNA, which just so happens to be around in small quantities in both parents, whether it be male or female. And the RNA will go over and probably do one of two things. Either modify histone modifications, or it will go through and act as silencing RNA and effectively destroy certain bits of mRNA, which is to say it'll prevent certain proteins from being made, at least in the quantities that they would normally be made. So once that happens, those RNAs that are passed down from your parents are used up and they're gone. And that happens before your embryo starts dividing, or your zygote, so to speak, starts dividing. So RNA is not passed down by any means. It is used up, and it does come from your parents in order to exert its effects immediately and then disappear. But she didn't understand any of that. And that was really aggravating to me. So that's another thing that we kind of tried to discuss there. Alright, just going on for another few titles of talks here. What it means to be human in civil rights. So once again, trying to get at the whole equality thing. But I guess more we were kind of looking at more of a legal aspect of this, so to speak. And then we had a banquet that night that we got to hear of this this gentleman who received the Religious Liberty Award. He's actually done a number of important things as far as large-scale political types of acts. Let me see. He was the chairman of the United States Commission on Civil Rights and was appointed to that position by Obama for 5 years. So, like I said, had a big role as far as civil rights are concerned at the national level. So, I was really impressed. He had actually gotten a lot of good stuff. But then they had my favorite speaker. Just because I had grown up watching his show on Discovery Channel, or rather, and being able to finally see him in person was just an outstanding experience. I loved every bit of it. Definitely filmed it as much as I could. And it was really cool to be able to see the co-host of Mythbusters, Adam Savage, in person and get to talk to him. Because he actually hung around, he was nice enough to hang around afterwards, after he accepted the Humanist of the Year award from AHA. He hung around afterwards and was able to take pictures with people and talk with people very briefly. I just found that to be really, really cool. I love that. Just because he is so great at reaching out to people and being able to teach them the scientific method, and teach it in a way that is really interesting. That grabs people's attention. I just love that. I think that's so cool. So cool. I want to learn that power. And so that's why I asked him. It's just like, hey man, I'm a teacher, and I love trying to teach the scientific method, but I can't always get the kids interested in it. And he kind of turns to me and he says, well, you just got to learn to take them on an adventure. Remind them what it is to not know, and to go on a journey of discovery to try to figure out that unknown. And so I guess that's kind of what he's tried to do as far as his stuff. He has a nice web series that he's doing lately. But that was also what he was trying to do on the show Mythbusters, was that he was trying to take the audience on an adventure, on a journey to figure out the facts and truth about certain topics, in order to try to crush some of these urban myths, so to speak, and put them in a scientific context. I loved that. Loved that about Adam Savage. And it was just being able to try to glean that tiny little bit of information from him, just very briefly, was just awesome. I love that. I'll definitely treasure meeting him for the rest of my life, and try to emulate some of what he did in various ways, in the various ways that I have access to, and try to engage in on a regular basis. So anyway, that was essentially just the first day of talks during this Humanist conference. The rest of the talks were very much along the same types of lines. Definitely some very interesting people. We even had Lucian Greaves of the Satanic Temple. He basically kind of encourages the opposition of Christianity by posing as Satanists. And I say posing because we're all humanists. We don't worship Satan. That's ridiculous. But he makes a good point when he goes around calling himself a member of a Satanic Temple, because when it comes to a number of things in equality, it's definitely one thing to put up a cross or put up a nativity scene on public ground, at a courthouse or something. It's one thing to do that. It's another thing entirely to say, well, in order to be fair and equal, we're going to allow this statue of the devil and have some angels burning and being poked by demons. It's another thing to say that that's okay at the same time. Generally speaking, when you go up to somebody and you ask them if that would be okay, they would say no. even though if they're truly being equal and fair, they need to say yes. Therefore, it kind of emphasizes and points out their own bias towards Christian types of displays, and it normally shuts down whatever display that is and prevents it from ever being displayed again. So that's part of what they've been doing, is just pointing out all these instances of hypocrisy where people are very much so showing favoritism towards Christianity and its relics and sorts of activities. So very, very interesting there. But the rest of the guys, I mean, it was a great conference. I was just kind of bored the first day and a half or so, because honestly, when it comes to gay stuff and equality, I know most all of that stuff. So I was kind of bored the first day and a half, but it picked up after that, and we definitely got some good bits of information near the end of the conference. So cool. That was the 76th annual conference of the AHA, and I fully intend on going next year. Hopefully, I'll be allowed to talk next year. I would love to give a scientific perspective on any of this types of stuff, depending on what the theme is going to be next year. But it definitely seemed like a very cool conference and some neat people. So I'm definitely amped up to go again. But thank you so much for joining me on this week's episode of Based on Facts, where we got to talk about the Humanist Conference that I just went to. And if you're interested in finding other Based on Facts episodes, you can find us on Facebook or on YouTube just by searching for Based on Facts in the search bar. So, thank you so much for joining me. My name is Chris Rex, and have a great week.